My name's Alana Waksman. I'm the writer, director, producer of We Burn Like This, which is a narrative feature here at Tallgrass Film Festival that, is about Ray, who's a young Jewish woman who lives in Billings, Montana, and she's a descendant of Holocaust survivors, and she comes up against some present-day antisemitism that triggers her into a journey towards healing. So it's inspired by true events in my life and people I know, but it's fictionalized.
Hi, my name is Emily Branham, and I'm the director, producer, editor, most times shooter, whatever, for this documentary feature, Being Bebe, the Bebe Zahara Benet documentary, which is about the first winner of RuPaul's Drag Race, Bebe Zahara Benet, who's also originally from Cameroon in West Africa, where it's illegal to be gay and mob justice is commonplace. And yeah, we explored 15 years in their life. I started filming it in 2006. Wow. And I met Bebe through my little sister who was dancing back up for her.
Wow.
So it's a longitudinal portrait of an artist.
So with documentary makes it a little bit more unique from narrative, because to spend 15 years, at what point did you feel like there was a story there?
Well, early on, I knew there was something really special about Bebe. I went into this thinking I was making a short film about one pageant. This was his first national drag pageant that he was doing as this amateur drag performer in Minneapolis. And I was like, that sounds like a great short film. And he was open to me following into this first pageant. But after the pageant, I was like, there's just a lot more there with this person. And I don't know where it's going to go, but I asked if we could keep filming and see what happened. And he didn't really know what I was after or what we were doing, but he was open to it, thank goodness. And so about 3 years after we started filming together and I was looking for the story, he was cast on season 1 of this reality show that was about drag performers, like a top model, but for drag queens. And he turned it down 3 times and finally agreed to do it. And when he won that show, I was like, oh, well, I think there's definitely a built-in audience for this. I think we need to make sure we do it right and see it through. And I thought that would be the ending in 2009, but there was more there.
So you say where he's from, it's illegal to be gay. Would him dressing in drag qualify as being gay or just a lifestyle?
Excellent question. He's really keen on that distinction. He doesn't like to put a label on his sexual orientation or gender identity. He also is very fluid with pronouns. He, she, they, all fair game. So yeah, he likes to separate drag from sexuality, and he doesn't identify as gay or queer and really resist those labels. That said, drag is such an intrinsic part of the LGBTQ experience and community that he has identified as a member of the community.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and in your film, a narrative, what drew you to want to tell? You said it's part autobiographical, part of your life. What made you say, this is one of those stories I really want to develop out?
Yeah, well, it's been a long journey. I've been working on this film for 7 years, and this is my first feature film, and it started off in a very different way. I'll try to tell it concisely, but I had written a short film when I was in grad school that was centered on an Indigenous young woman who was dealing with her historical trauma and searching for a sense of belonging and healing. And I had set this film in Montana, and I had actually never been to Montana, and my cousin lives there, and I used to write to her as pen pals when I was young, so I think it just kind of filed in my brain somewhere. And I'm originally from Iowa, so I kind of thought, well, it's kind of like Iowa, but with mountains, probably. And so I wrote this film, and then when I graduated, I wanted to create a feature because I felt like I wouldn't be taken seriously as a director. No one was going to hire me to direct coming out of school. And so I figured I better make my own film, and I wanted to explore this topic. So I ended up moving to Montana to better understand what was happening in the Native community and in Montana in general, because I realized when I visited there that it was just such a different place that it was going to take some time to understand. And a few years into it, after talking to a lot of people and spending a lot of time in the Northern Cheyenne Reservation, where the identity of the character was originally Northern Cheyenne, I decided to change it to be more personal. And I had reflected on myself in a different way from spending time around the Native community, who are very connected to the trauma that has happened to them, and they talk about it and they're living in it, and their lives are still affected by, and it happened, they're living on the land where these horrible things happened to their tribes, and so they're facing it daily. And someone kind of reflected to me that when I was talking about my history and my grandparents are Holocaust survivors, that, that it's similar, that there's some commonality there. And I had never thought about myself like that or thought about my history like that. And I think it's partially because I never met my grandparents, and it was always just this fact about them or about me that I had no personal experience of. And so I just started to realize that in a way I was writing about myself in my attraction to writing about the Indigenous character, and it would be better off to be just telling a story from my perspective instead of a non-Native person telling a Native story. And also around that time, it was about 2016, and the election had just happened, and I was living in Missoula, Montana, and the morning after the election, there were neo-Nazi flyers that showed up on the doorstep of the synagogue in town. And then from there, they started showing up on Jewish homes, these flyers. And I had never experienced anti-Semitism in the area where I'm living in my lifetime. And it was a wake-up call to realize that this hasn't gone anywhere. This hatred and towards Jewish people is still very present. They just haven't been as vocal. And with the administration, they felt validated and comfortable to express how they feel. And so that helped me connect to what my family went through. And it wasn't that long ago, that it's, my parents had me when they were a little older. So, it's only my grandparents that went through this. And I'm first generation on my dad's side. So anyway, all that kind of filtered into my story, and it became, as time went on, we've seen a lot more anti-Semitism in the last years, since 2016 moving forward in Montana, in our country, around the world. And so it's just felt, for better and for worse, for sure, that my film has felt more urgent, or I felt more urgent about telling this story about how it feels to be a young Jewish girl in Montana, where there's not a lot of Jewish people around, and to be kind of singled out and targeted by white supremacist groups. And just like kind of basing all this historical trauma is also like how it's dealing with pain is really what the story is about.
Was there moments in developing that story or even shooting it that you started to learn a little bit more about yourself and maybe some stuff within this narrative that is still traumatizing for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been hearing this more and more, just like, it's actually like a stereotype that Jewish people can be just kind of neurotic and anxious people. And that's actually trauma. And so I actually, in the time of making this film, started having anxiety attacks. And I had never experienced anxiety attacks before. And so there was a lot of self-growth and reflection that I started to have. And so that's what also helped me start thinking of like, well, I've had a perfectly supportive and non-traumatizing upbringing, where does this anxiety come from? You know, what there's stuff that I've inherited is kind of how I started to think about it. And I think that's how I think about also, you know, we've all inherited things that our families have been through, and there's been so much trauma in so many different communities. And I think, that personally for me, just like, there's just like a degree of like worry and degree of like kind of, there's actually like scientific studies more and more about this called epigenetics, where your DNA is changed when you've been exposed to a really extreme trauma, and then you hand that down when you have children, like on a genetic level. And so just like chemicals, you know, chemical responses even, just like how I might respond to something that might be stressful, I might just kick into a sort of anxiety state more easily than people who have not experienced trauma in their family because of what my family has survived and endured. And that's just like chemical DNA thing. Mm-hmm. And that's really fascinating to me. And I didn't realize that that's what I was writing about when I started writing. I was just trying to work out my ideas of how different things I feel. The character kind of goes through some addiction as well in the film. And that's my way of kind of demonstrating her dealing with pain, like her own pain and avoidance of pain. So I'm just, and having compassion basically was kind of where I was coming from, you know, that you see her make these decisions that are easy to judge, but then we get a chance to understand more about where this all comes from for her and why this is happening. And I hope that, you know, people might relate to her or either on a personal level or know people like her, and just have a little more compassion and understanding for people we're all dealing with various forms of pain that we're trying to work through and overcome and heal. And what does it mean to heal, I guess, is kind of what the question I'm putting out there and trying to address in the film.
Emily, with your particular subject, being in the LGBT community brings its own anxiety and trauma that goes with that. Is there anything within that time period of covering that story and developing and getting out, going to the festivals, that you maybe even learned about yourself in terms of your perspective, and also with him, with his, you know, the response from his hometown and trying to come up out of that shell and be something more than that and still express what he feels his identity to be?
Yeah, so I just have to say, I think that Marshall, my protagonist, is an incredible, resilient, ambitious, persistent person. And that has inspired me throughout my process as well. And really all the drag performers that I met at the Gay 90s in Minneapolis when I first started this out just really, really, really inspired me to be a more courageous, persistent artist, because that's what they're all doing. And, you know, the story is ultimately one that's pretty hopeful at the end of the day, even though he is coming from a place where, you know, people are struggling every day to either conceal their sexual identity. Like, that wasn't necessarily how he experienced life. He experienced some bullying at school, but in his home life, he was so supported by his family. And he didn't know what gay was. And he still, you know, like I said, he doesn't identify as gay, but he knew he was different. You know, he does have a way of presenting himself in the world that is so charismatic, that is, you know, it is beyond gender. And at least that's how we have socialized ourselves to understand it. And so I take a tremendous inspiration from him to just keep going and to explore things about myself. This, because it was a 15-year journey, it ended up being quite a personal experience for me as well. And developing relationship with him, with his family, coming to terms with, you know, the ups and downs of my creative career. The film is sort of about how a creative career doesn't go in a straight line, that you have peaks and valleys and everybody has struggles. And things are not always as they seem on the outside.
Now, it is kind of close to the time. I don't know, 10:15.
Oh yeah, let's do like a few more minutes.
Okay.
Just a few more minutes. They're waiting out there, but I think I still have time to get out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll ask another question.
Yeah.
Is there a point in the release and getting it done where you kind of looked at the final piece and really felt like, this scene comes on, I really feel good about that scene? What is that? What was that like, and what is that scene?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I think what happens to be like, I really like the midpoint of the film, actually. And when I was writing it, that was always the part I was trying to get to, especially in writing the first half of the script. And I think I was excited about it because it kind of was going to blur a bunch of periods of time together. And so visually, it's very interesting. It's cutting to a lot of different moments that I don't know how to talk about it actually without giving away a part of the film. But the character, it's her low moment, right? She goes, it's also her like kind of fighting for something that she thinks she wants in that moment and kind of getting laid out literally on her back. And then we go into the second half of the movie. Mm-hmm. So it's, I was excited I really try to approach filmmaking from a very emotionally driven visual standpoint, like trying to represent how things feel in a visual way. And so I worked closely with my cinematographer, who I actually know from when I was in grad school, to figure out a visual language to kind of map her emotional journey. So there's, it's called We Burn Like This, and the fire theme is relevant on many different levels in the film. That she's involved with a childhood accident that involves fire, but then it also becomes more metaphorical and spiritually significant, I guess, of the burning, and both in a negative and positive way. And so we kind of cut to these more abstract visuals of her surrounded in colors of fire that kind of just intersperse. And it's a moment where I guess I get to kind of talk about, like, bring the film to a bigger, more like what's going on underneath the surface, I guess, way. If that makes sense.
Did it come out the way that you wrote it on screen?
For the most part, it did, yeah. And we hint in that moment, too, about the accident with fire in that moment. So, we definitely had to play around, and my editor was really helpful with bringing this moment together because we're cutting to a bunch of different things, and we spent a lot of time figuring out the sequencing of how this should go. And he definitely helped the lead into it. Like, the scene that leads into it is much more of a montage than I had written it. And it's interesting, especially when I was in grad school, I would do things, I would tell stories in a way that my teachers often didn't understand what I was saying. And were kind of confused because I went through USC, and that school is well known for being like kind of turning out people who are very successful in the studio system and making studio films. And my film is not a studio film. And so I'm kind of telling, there were some teachers that have had success in the indie film realm, but yeah, I feel like I'm going all over the place, but I knew that this scene had the potential to not make sense, is what I'm saying, because I had tried stuff out like that in school, and my teachers were often just kind of confused. And so I was happy to see, I felt instinctively that it could work somehow. And we shot everything, and my editor helped put it all together in a way that it just clicked one day. And I was like, it worked. It's making me feel things. That's what I was hoping for. The story is coming across. And it was a combination of like putting in some temp music that kind of helped bring it all together. And we ended up having this amazing score that they kind of used our temp music as a base to understand the tone and the vibe of the music. So the music that comes in during there is wonderful too. And, you know, when you're for me, when the film is so internal that, and emotional, that sound ends up being a really important component. And so, yeah, the music and the visuals together kind of, I hope, take you on a journey, and yeah, make you feel what she's feeling.
Okay. Well, since you have to go, I want you to just introduce yourself one more time in your film and any website or social thing you want.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So that.
So my name's Alana Waksman, and I'm the writer, director, producer of We Burn Like This, which is a narrative feature here at Tall Grass. And my website is weburnlikethis.com. And we've been having a wonderful festival run so far. And we actually were playing in Brazil this week, which was great. And we played in France last month. And we've been touring around to various festivals in the U.S. as well. And so, yeah, you can find out more about the film, more about the crew and the cast on the website, and also any upcoming screenings we have.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the time out.
Yeah.
Congratulations on everything that's happening with the movie.
Thank you.
Sounds like it's good. I got to watch it now.
Yeah. It's at 12:30 today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Be there.
All right.
I can't wait.
And we're both today. So got a nice lineup of films today.
I think she had the closing.
Closing night. Yeah. Thank you.
All right.